actually a provision in the criminal code that legally jurors can't talk about their deliberations in Canada. So this is different. Sometimes you'll see in the U.S., especially after a very high-profile trial, there'll be jurors on the talk show circuit, sometimes get a book deal, and they'll talk extensively about how the jury made their decisions. You're not going to see that in Canada because there is this prohibition against talking about deliberation. So we started looking, what can we look at that doesn't involve that aspect?
Which explains why you started looking down south.
Yes.
How can the lack of understanding affect the outcome of a trial?
There's a couple different ways. So a lot of these terms, like you said, they have very specific meanings within a legal context. And when the judge is giving these instructions, they're supposed to give the jurors appropriate guidelines for how they're supposed to think about things, how they're supposed to interpret information. And also specific charges, say for example, first-degree murder, there's very specific things that have to be proven in order to find someone guilty of that particular crime. So if people misunderstand the terms and the charges, they could lead to verdicts that aren't supported by legal principles, and it could lead to wrongful convictions.
How can you make then, and we'll go there now, these things easier for people to understand?
One of the things that we're working on right now is trying to develop these common language instructions. We're also looking at applying some of the things that have been used in other jurisdictions. For one is the common language instructions, but also looking at things like note-taking, summaries of information. We're going to play with a few different things.
Are there jurisdictions then that have a different language that they're already starting to work with?
So there are in the States. I believe it's California has actually really tried to implement these common language instructions. And I've also heard from, individual judges as well that they've done this individually of their own accord in some cases.
What kind of impact do you hope your research will have?
Really what we're hoping is that, one, that there's some awareness and that actually it can end up being used by the justice system to improve the processes and procedures, because in this case we're talking about the Canadian criminal justice system on a national level. So even if we can make small improvements in process, it can actually have quite a big impact in the end.
Can you elaborate on something you mentioned? Like your example was sort of first-degree murder. So like first and secondary murder, for example, they need very specific different kinds of proof. Is that sort of the kind of depth that a juror might not have any clue about?
So when the judge is giving the instructions, they will say, here's the things that you need to, that the Crown has to prove in order to find the accused guilty of first-degree murder. But it is written by a lawyer, right? So there's actually what are called pattern instructions, which is kind of a group of instructions that are prepared ahead of time. The judge adapts them to the case, but the judge essentially will be reading the same types of instructions. And sorry, can you remind me?
No, you've answered the question. I'm interested in this because I think what's interesting, there's a crossover in what you're talking about to our profession as journalists. Mm-hmm. When you interview lawyers, doctors, professors about research, it always comes down to there's often a follow-up. How do you say that in layman's terms? How do you say that for people to understand? And it's not so different. But there's so much riding on a juror understanding all of this.
There really is, and it's something that I've thought about for my own research is, so there's a lot of very complicated, statistical and experimental things about it. So I'm trying to figure out, for myself, how to make this research understood to people who aren't researchers.
Now, you are still doing your recruiting for your study. What can people do if they want to take part?
If they wanted to take part, they can call or text 431-338-1976, or they can email psychlaw@uwinnipeg.ca.
And if they want to take part, what would their role be, or do they have to have any experience having been a juror, or what are you looking for?
We're actually looking just for Canadian citizens who are above the age of 18 and are not students in any capacity.
Interesting work you're doing, Michelle. Thanks for coming in.
Great, thanks so much for having me.
That's Michelle Bertrand, psychologist and associate professor in the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Winnipeg.
After Cameron Adams and Nick Austin, CBC 89.3 FM, Uma. Hello, my name is Cameron Adams and I speak Cree. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM.
a.m. on 89.3 FM on CBC. Thanks for joining us today. It is Thursday, September 12th. School 2, 10 degrees in Winnipeg. It's cloudy again. Get up, get at it. And we have some rain coming late today and a lot of rain overnight. Well, from hurricanes to politics, for years, journalist Anderson Cooper of CNN has reported on major stories all around the world. This weekend, he makes his first trip to Winnipeg. He'll be on stage at the Centennial Concert Hall on Sunday for an evening with Anderson Cooper. After his speech, there will be a question and answer session. It's hosted by Up to Speed's Ismaila Alpha. Now, Ismaila had a really great interview with Cooper back in August. He asked him to describe the challenges of reporting in the era of Donald Trump.
Well, look, reporting is always challenging. I, had issues with the Obama administration. I used to do a lot of interviews with candidate Obama and somewhat President Obama, and then he was unhappy with my coverage of the BP oil spill, and I didn't get to do another interview with President Obama until right before he left office. And, the White House is, it's full of human beings, and human beings get upset about stuff. Certainly, look, Donald Trump, as a president, he says things which are not true repeatedly, constantly, every day, and he repeats them. And whether he believes them or not, it doesn't really matter. What he's saying is not, in many cases, true. And it's our job to point that out. And that it reaches a volume at some point where it's so often that you're sort of left wondering, well, do you just repeatedly point out what is not true, or do you at a certain point you have to kind of move on and cover other stuff? Because if all you were doing was just correcting his facts, you could do that all day long and never actually get into anything beyond that.
Anderson Cooper spoke with Ismaila Alpha last month. An evening with Anderson Cooper is on Sunday at 7 o'clock. Ismaila's hosting it. It's at the Centennial Concert Hall. So Cooper will speak. Then there's a Q&A, and we have tickets to give away. Want to go? Call us right now at 780-0893, 780-0893 to see Anderson Cooper on Sunday, or 1-800-268-5483, 1-800-268-5483, or 780-893. Good luck. Get calling. I know the lines are lighting up, and we will be giving another pair away tomorrow as well. It's 12 minutes now to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, and Easter's coming back next May, but they just released their first single. They're channeling their inner Van Halen with this one. their new album next May. That's the first single from it. The album's called Van Weezer. Can you guess why? The tune's called The End of the Game. I enjoyed that a lot. It's 9 minutes to 8 o'clock on CBC Radio 1. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. And in Winnipeg, it is cloudy this morning. If you were hoping for sun, not so much, not yet. But it'll happen. Not today, though. Mainly cloudy and breezy. Chance of a morning shower, and then afternoon and evening rain. A high of 14 degrees. Brandon's 9, and winds are northeast at 32 there. Dauphin is cloudy and 11 degrees. Thompson's misty, and it is minus 2 degrees in Thompson this morning. Coming up on the program after 8 o'clock, a late Lyme disease diagnosis has one Manitoba woman fighting for her life in a Florida hospital. We're going to hear what it's taken to get the diagnosis in the first place, but also why there's hope for treatment. So that's coming up on the program after 8 o'clock right here on Information Radio. Next on the show, in Winnipeg, official, the 43rd federal election is underway, and political party leaders are fanning out across the country to pitch themselves with voters. So yesterday, day one, we have a sampling of what everyone was saying first. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau was offering a list of his party's accomplishments over the past 4 years.
We've put more money in people's pockets by cutting taxes for the middle class and raising them on the wealthiest 1%. We stopped sending child benefit checks to millionaires so we could send more to the single parent working 2 jobs, to the family of 5 that falls a bit short at the end of each month. We made the Canada pension plan stronger because in a country like ours, seniors shouldn't struggle to make ends meet. We renegotiated NAFTA, securing trade access to our largest and most important trading partner at a time of U.S. protectionism and unpredictability.
But his biggest political rival, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer, says Justin Trudeau is not to be trusted.
We have been telling Canadians, showing Canadians how Justin Trudeau has consistently misled them. He has lied. He has looked Canadians in the eye and said things that he knew was not true. And we made the case that he has lost the moral authority to govern. So, over the next 5 weeks or so, we're going to be outlining our vision for the country to put more money back in the pockets of Canadians and let them get ahead. But what today shows is that you just cannot trust Justin Trudeau. He will say anything to cover up his scandals, and he'll say anything to get reelected, and Canadians cannot believe the things that he says.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh also speaking on day one of the campaign trail, explaining his hopeful vision for Canada.
We have an exciting opportunity over the next 40 days. We are going to bring a hopeful message to Canadians that we can build a country of our dreams. A country where everyone has a place to call home. Healthcare when they need it. Clean water to drink and clean air to breathe. Good jobs and a bright future. You know, everywhere I go, I meet hardworking people, wanting to be treated fairly and want to build a good life for themselves and their family. These are the people we Democrats have always worked for. These are the people I'm in it for. Thank you.
To Green Party leader now Elizabeth May, she spoke to supporters and told people why her platform is about more than climate change.
This is the most important election in Canadian history. This is a chance for Canada and for Canadian citizens to decide, maybe for the first time in their lives, the first time in our lives, that what matters most is that we vote for what we believe in and vote for what we want. Our agenda is big. It is human rights. It's also it is child care. It is making sure that our students don't have to pay tuition anymore and our universities don't have to go hand in hand to ask corporations to give them chairs in the area of profits. That is
In final
to cut foreign aid. We need to bring back that money here in Canada. That's why the name of our party is the People Party. We are putting people first, Canadian first. Why it's so important to balance the budget? Because it is not fair for the future generation right now. They will have to pay. They will have to pay these huge deficit, and they won't receive any services. So to be responsible, we need to balance the budget, and we'll do that in 2 years.
So that was a sampling of some of what our political leaders at the federal level had to say on the official first day of the election campaign, which was yesterday. We heard Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, and Green Party leader Elizabeth May, as well as People's Party leader Maxime Bernier. On the polls October 21st. It is 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, and I just want to make a small mention. We had hoped to have the story about the Wellington Crescent home on right now, and that was spared from demolition at the last minute. It is now back in front of councillors today, and throughout the news today and throughout the day on CBC, you will hear that story. We were just unable to get it to you on the program this morning. Right now, though, we do have news about other stories and headlines with Heather Walls.
Good morning. Well, an Winnipeg family faces hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills after a misdiagnosis of Lyme disease forced a young mother to go to Florida for treatment. The citizens group that revealed irregularities in Winnipeg's inspections branch is pleased the city has taken action, firing 8 employees, suspending 7 others, but it still wants the city to review the role managers played by allowing fraudulent time cards and mileage reports to be filed by building inspectors. Your next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather. It is 10 degrees in Winnipeg, going for 14, and a cloudy morning to start your Thursday. Let's get details on the commute. Channel 8.
It looks like a collision might be the reason for our long lineup on southbound Main. Tony called and he was at Main and Aberdeen. Big lineup, bumper to bumper, and he said up ahead he looks like he'd see an emergency vehicle parked in the far right lane. So slow going southbound Main, also very slow going northbound Osborne, still backed up to about Former right now. And if anything gets in your way, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Channel 8. Anderson Cooper tickets have been won. We have another set to give away tomorrow. After 8 o'clock, we'll hear what it took for a Manitoba woman to finally receive that treatment for late-stage Lyme disease.
Today on Q, back in the 90s, Julia Stiles played rom-com characters that were outspoken, sarcastic, and different. Decades later, her latest movie is just as radical. We'll hear why Julia Stiles was dying to be a part of it from the moment she got the script.
What if somebody calls the cops and says what? I spent $5,000 at a strip club, send help.
Q with Tom Power this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. A high-ranking spy posing as a bureaucrat mysteriously disappears. Is it the stuff of movies or real life? In fact, a CIA operative who'd infiltrated the Kremlin vanished in 2017. Laura Lynch gets the inside intel on spies coming in from the cold on The Current in half an hour.
This is World Report. Good morning. It is Thursday, September 12th. From CBC News, I'm Neil Kirksal. The first debate of the federal election is set for tonight, and it will give Justin Trudeau's opponents several chances to attack. The Liberal leader will be the only major party leader not taking part. He never planned to. Trudeau did, though, wish everyone a happy campaign as he boarded his freshly unveiled plane yesterday. He flew to Vancouver for a rally with supporters, then on to Victoria, and that's where the Liberal plane had a mishap with the campaign's own media bus. Artem Perry was on it.
We were waiting for our luggage to be loaded on board. Now, when that happened, our bus pulled away, and almost immediately we heard a loud scraping sound.
That sound was the bus scraping the plane's left wing as it tried to drive under it. No one was hurt, but after a day of being pressed by reporters on the latest SNC Lavalin reports and his stance on Quebec's secularism bill, the metaphor was lost on no one. Tom was at Trudeau's events, and he tells us the tough questions were not just coming from reporters.
For Justin Trudeau, it was a repeat performance. The Liberal leader began his 2015 campaign in BC. He returned to kick off his bid for re-election.
Poverty is way down, unemployment is at historic lows, and job creation is way up.
Unlike 2015, Trudeau is now running on his record, including his government's decision to buy the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
We have taken unprecedented steps to keep our air clean and our water safe with a $1.5 billion.
A climate protester tried to interrupt Trudeau last night, but was drowned out by Liberal supporters. 19-year-old Harrison Johnston says he was only trying to ask Trudeau why he isn't doing more to fight climate change.
Will he be able to look his kids in the eye and tell them that he did everything he could? And right now, I don't think that he is able to do that.
Pipeline politics aren't the only challenge to the Liberals in BC. This is the home province of former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould, the woman at the center of the SNC-Lavalin affair, an issue which continues to dog the Liberals in these early days of the campaign. Tom Perry, CBC News, Victoria.
The campaign says there's no change to Trudeau's schedule today. He has some more appearances in BC before heading to Alberta. Things did not go smoothly for the NDP yesterday either. That party lost 2 candidates. Doc Curry, who was running in BC, was asked to step down after the party found what it calls problematic engagement on his social media accounts 2 years ago. In Montreal, Olivier Mathieu also resigned after his former spouse accused him of domestic abuse. He denies the allegations. The Conservative, NDP, and Green Party leaders are all in the Toronto area today. They'll all be at the Maclean's City TV debate tonight. For one Manitoba family, it's all politics all the time. One member was running in the provincial election that wrapped Tuesday night. Another hit the federal campaign trail first thing yesterday morning. Karen Pauls has their story.
Tuesday night, this campaign office in a North End Winnipeg strip mall was where Cindy Lamoureux came to celebrate her re-election as the Liberal MLA for Tyndall Park.
And I know that I would not be here without my father because of what he has taught me over the years.
Her dad, Kevin Lamoureux, is also a politician seeking his second term as the Liberal MP for Winnipeg North.
All the way up till midnight, it was all about Cindy and the provincial election, the Tyndall Park. As of 12:01, it was about Winnipeg North. And we're quite excited about now getting our campaign in high gear.
Yesterday, Cindy's campaign signs came down and Kevin's went up.
What's a day off?
Carlisle Foga was Cindy's campaign manager. He's now volunteering on Kevin's campaign.
Ready to tackle another campaign that's 5 times the size of Tyndall Park.
Then there's Stan Tatarn, who volunteered on Cindy's campaign and is managing her father's.
The volunteers have worked really hard, and now I'm going to have to get them to continue working hard.
There's been a lot of talk of voter fatigue in Manitoba after a summer provincial election. Federal volunteers and fundraising will have to ramp up for another 40 days of campaigning. But in this office, at least, they're up for it. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Alberta has announced millions of dollars in funding to help deal with the opioid crisis. The money will go towards thousands of new addiction recovery spaces. The plan focuses on treatment, but some people are worried that could take away from harm reduction strategies already in place. Aaron Collins has the details.
The government of Alberta will create 4,000 spaces to treat Albertans suffering from addiction.
Welcome news from Premier Jason Kenney at this addiction recovery conference in Calgary. An $80 million commitment and a possible shift in the province's strategy for dealing with opioid addiction towards treatment and away from harm reduction.
Attempts to manage addictions can sometimes